If you're new to the UFO topic or you know someone who is, where do you start? Where do you point them first? It's a question I've been thinking about a lot lately, and who better to ask than one of the most well-known UFO whistleblowers, David Grusch. And a few weeks ago at a press conference on Capitol Hill, I got my chance.
Mr. Grusch, Kristin Fisher with The Endless Void. Do you have any advice for people who are new to the UFO topic, the UAP topic, who just really don't know where to begin? There's just so much misinformation out there. What is your advice to them?
There is a declassified 1971 Australian formerly classified secret assessment that a couple years ago was put in the Australian National Archives. I encourage people to read page 7 through 16, and that was the nuclear branch chief of the Australian government discussing the US cover-up and the involvement of the CIA back in the 70s. And that's actually a little-known document that is publicly available.
A secret file typed in 1971 by a nuclear scientist inside Australian intelligence and classified for decades is now just sitting in a public government archive where anyone can read it. So I read it. And what makes this file so powerful isn't what it says, it's who's saying it. Not an American, not a believer, but an outsider. A senior scientist inside an allied government with a security clearance who studied what the U.S. was doing and called it a cover-up, a deliberate campaign backed by the CIA to ridicule UFOs and anyone who claimed to see them. So in this video, we're going to meet the man who wrote it, break down his most explosive claims, separate what's proven from what isn't, and figure out why this old file from Australia is where David Grusch tells you to begin. And for those that don't know, David Grusch is an Air Force combat veteran and career intelligence officer who held top secret security clearances, served on the government's UFO task force, filed a whistleblower complaint through legal channels, was deemed credible and urgent by the intelligence community's own watchdog, and testified to Congress under penalty of perjury. So when a man with those credentials tells you where to start, you listen. And the file he pointed to was written by someone that not many people know of. In 1971, a physicist named Harry Turner typed up a secret assessment for his superiors in Australian intelligence with a very dry title, Scientific and Intelligence Aspects of the UFO Problem. Now, Turner was not some fringe character. He was a scientist, a nuclear physicist who spent years working on the British atomic bomb tests in the Australian outback, and by 1971, he was the head of the nuclear branch of Australia's Joint Intelligence Organization. His day job was assessing nuclear threats for the Australian government. So this isn't some conspiracy theorist spitballing. It is the head of the nuclear branch inside Australia's defense intelligence apparatus telling his own government what he believed was true. And what he believed is the reason that this file still matters so much more than half a century later. Here is the very first paragraph, and I'm just going to read it to you. He writes, "The early analysis of UFO reports by U.S. Air Force intelligence indicated that real phenomena were being reported which had flight characteristics so far in advance of U.S. aircraft that only an extraterrestrial origin could be envisioned." Now, from there, Turner walks through the history of modern-day UFOs, the first flying saucer reports in 1947, a string of U.S. Air Force investigations with names like Project Sign and Project Grudge. Then comes the summer of 1952, and that massive wave of sightings, including objects that were tracked over Washington, D.C., and military communication channels getting overloaded with reports. According to Turner, that's what alarmed the CIA. Not aliens, logistics. Because if American defense communications could be overwhelmed by reports of flying saucers, then the Soviets could exploit it. So, in January 1953, the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence convened a panel of scientists, the Robertson Panel. And in Turner's telling, that is the moment that the modern UFO stigma was born. He writes that the CIA persuaded the U.S. Air Force to use its public UFO office, Project Blue Book, as a tool for debunking. And then comes the phrase that this whole episode hangs on. Turner writes that the U.S. erected a facade of ridicule. He writes, By erecting a facade of ridicule, the U.S. hoped to allay public alarm, reduce the possibility of the Soviet taking advantage of UFO mass sightings for either psychological or actual warfare purposes, and act as a cover for the real U.S. program of developing vehicles that emulate UFO performances. So he's being really explicit here. The ridicule was the strategy. No scientist, no reporter, no member of Congress wanted to be the one who took flying saucers seriously. But a joke only works on the public. For the people on the inside, the pilots, the officers, the ones who actually saw something, you need fear. And Turner points right to it. A regulation called JANAP 146 that made it a crime for service members to publicly disclose a UFO sighting report, punishable by up to 10 years in prison and or a $10,000 fine. So threaten the insiders while simultaneously ridiculing the subject in public. And if that sounds familiar, it should, because it's the same playbook that David Grusch and other whistleblowers say that they face today, right? Careers threatened, reputations attacked. Turner wrote it down in 1971, and then he goes even further. He writes that the U.S. government was quietly funding gravity control research, 46 separate projects by 1966, 33 of them under Air Force supervision. He writes, quote, "Such an intensive onslaught of the gravity enigma can only be rationalized within the context of a firm belief that UFOs were real and that the intelligences behind them knew how to control gravity. The drive to harness this power before the USSR could do so would be a strong incentive for the U.S. government to fully support an anti-gravity program." Now, I find all of that fascinating, but I've also heard it or something similar before from other sources. So to me, what really sets this document apart is the outsider credentials, a U.S. ally quietly documenting how America behaved. Buried in an appendix is this detail. In 1953, the same year as the Robertson panel, a U.S. Air Force attaché in Australia formally asked the Australians to send their UFO reports to the United States. And he told them that the U.S. was, quote, very interested in UFO reports from all over the world, despite the official American position that it was all misidentifications, hysteria, or hoaxes. So publicly, nothing to see here. Privately, send us everything. So Turner looked at all of this and told his government, quote, "It would appear wrong for Australia to remain ignorant of the true situation." He wanted Australia to launch its own scientifically rigorous investigation independent of the United States, but that never happened. So what does this file prove and what does it not prove, right? Well, the file is not proof that UFOs are extraterrestrial in origin. It's not even proof of a cover-up. It's proof of what one very senior scientist inside Allied intelligence concluded from where he sat with the information that he had in 1971. This also wasn't Australia's official position, right? It was one analyst making an argument to his bosses, an argument that they never acted on. But here's what the file does prove. It proves that the question of whether the United States was hiding what it knew about UFOs was being taken seriously, not by tabloids, but inside the intelligence agencies of one of America's closest allies. And it documents Australia's nuclear intelligence chief arguing that the stigma itself, that giggle factor of little green men, was not an accident. The laughter, he argued, was the plan. And that's why this is the document that David Grusch hands to beginners. It isn't a leak. It isn't anonymous. It's a paper typed in 1971, stamped secret, now just sitting in the National Archives of Australia, where anyone on Earth can read the whole thing. You can find it for yourself on naa.gov.au. I'll actually link it below in the description. And this file is especially pertinent now because the main reason for that press conference was to protect the people still trapped in the machine that Turner described. Whistleblowers like David Grusch coming forward today and fighting to do it without losing their careers, their reputations, or their freedoms. This file is proof that the fight isn't new. A U.S. ally was documenting it in 1971. So, here's my ask. Remember how we started, how you probably know someone who's curious about UFOs but don't know where they should start? Start here. Send them this video. Send them this document. And if that person's you, go read it. It's a quick, easy 17-page read, and I promise it's worth it. Then come back here and tell me in the comments what you thought about it, and I'll see y'all next time on The Endless Void.